there's an application fee for green. About how long are you guys trying to turn these around? Because it is only a few months in, but if you get bombarded, is there going to be a bottleneck because the standards and the needs of the industry change almost based off of a technology that DJI puts out. And so for us to constantly be paying catch up on standards, it'd be interesting for you to, yeah, just give us an idea of where it stands today as far as the requirements from a manufacturer standpoint.
Sure. First, the application fee. There is a small fee. That is largely to ensure that we as an organization can't be in the red, because when a company applies, it triggers a whole set of processes here where we schedule onboarding calls with us, with our assessment teams. The company gets access to the software that we've licensed. We have to invest a lot of time just for the initial onboarding of that. That's why there's a small application fee. It ensures that companies that apply are taking the process seriously. We also generate an estimate for them. So again, like that's why there's a small application fee. The timing, that's a great question. I think when we initially set out, we set a very ambitious goal when we talked to our initial companies that started the process, that we were aiming for like 6 to 8 weeks. We have already, could have learned in these first few months that that's probably a bit ambitious. This is, it's a lot of work. I think one of the differences between green and blue is we did add a corporate cyber hygiene assessment. That is something in particular that enterprise users want as part of the assessment of the drone. So for companies that have big fleets that are connected to their network, they want to know that the drone manufacturer is taking their own cybersecurity internally very seriously. So they go through that additional assessment as well, and that is a time-consuming assessment in addition to the actual physical assessment of the drone cyber penetration test and supply chain review. So it's going to take, I think, probably on average closer to 2.5, 3 months for companies. I think that's going to be a more likely average. And we do have the ability to scale. We have 2 companies right now that we're working with that are helping us with the assessment, and we're confident that those 2 companies can handle a fairly high degree of volume, and we have a mechanism to onboard additional assessors in the future should that be necessary.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael. And Brett, I know that you recently went through this process with Brink of applying for green. Do you have any feedback? And I think that transparency is good. It's obviously like, the good and bad could come out. Spare us anything that, maybe should be offline. But yeah, like what was that process like for you as a manufacturer? Do you have any feedback or something that other manufacturers might learn from in your experience?
Sure. I think Michael and I had a conversation maybe one day after the announcement, maybe 2 days after the announcement, something like that. And frankly, my hat's off to AUVSI. They made the actual application process very, very straightforward. It was not challenging to do. It made sense. I think what's important is transparency around the fees. And I think the estimate's very important, but this is more of a question to Michael. What goes into that fee in terms of a cost? Like if there was a COGS for this application fee, I think it's important that people understand. I know you have 2 companies that you've contracted with that are actually carrying out the assessment. I would imagine that's where it's going. But transparency around the fee structure, I think for the OEMs in the space is going to give us a level of comfort with that fee, because listen, when you're a hardware manufacturer, you have manufacturing fees, you have licensing fees. This is not out of the norm. This is fairly common practice for the things that you have to do, and it's part of getting to market. So AUVSI is also a private organization. They need to fund themselves outside of Exponential and the trade shows and membership fees. And I know there's been some back and forth in the industry of, well, why did AUVSI do this? And why wasn't it ASTM or ISO? Well, frankly, AUVSI is the only organization that has any background in drones and in the commercial space. ASTM, not necessarily. I've sat in some ASTM meetings for UTM and kind of wanted to pull my hair out. And so, again, hats off to AUVSI. I think this is an important path that is now separating the needs of DoD, all the other federal agencies, and the SLED market. So nothing but compliments to Michael and his team for the actual application process itself. It was not cumbersome or something where an OEM is going to be like, this isn't even worth the effort. It is absolutely worth the effort.
Perfect.
I appreciate that. I'm just on the cost real quick. It really it is dependent on the drone. I mean, we have some initial information on our website that sort of lays out the cost. But early on, what we try and do in the application process is provide an estimate. But that estimate is going to be based entirely on what the company puts in their application. How complex is the drone? Are you using commercial off-the-shelf technology? Are you modifying that technology? How many payloads do you have? So all of these factors, greatly impact the cost. I think on average right now, based on the companies that are in the program, I think on the low end, companies are looking, all in, all assessments, because, there's multiple different types of assessments that you can undertake also. If you're going the DoD route, you don't add remote connectivity because it's a closed loop network. If you're going, you want to have that remote connectivity, you can add that on. So, I think somewhere in the range of, $60,000 to $100,000 all in is probably about what the cost is looking like right now. But again, that's going to be variable based upon, the individual companies. Some may come in lower. Some ultimately may be higher than that. One company put in, I think, for like 7 payloads. Should they decide to go down that road, that's obviously going to be significantly more expensive. So it is variable, and we do try, in the interest of transparency, give them a quote, early on in the process once we have all the information, so that they can make a decision whether how and when they want to proceed. Because a lot of times when companies get that quote back, their path forward may change a little bit.
Appreciate that, Michael. And I don't know, Bobby, between you and Chris, who raised your hand first, but Chris, if you want to kick it off, just because, we've heard Bobby's voice a little more. You're muted, Chris.
Yeah, so, I actually have some follow-up questions for Michael, if that's okay. I think, one thing that would be good to get clarity on for this framework is around, how does it differ from NDAA requirements in terms of country of origin, manufacturing? Because I think, look, at the heart of all of this is what's the cost of the drone, right? And so I think there's, if we can start talking about a little bit about how those requirements differ from Blue, then we can really start getting to, is this a good solution for solving the cost problem and capabilities problem that we're seeing in the public safety sector?
Yeah. So as I said, there's 2 different pathways a company can go. So you can choose to go the way of Blue, and then you're going to have to meet, the legal NDA requirement that is set by the United States Congress that ultimately resulted in the Blue UAS program's creation. However, if a company, and we do have some companies that have no intention of ever selling to the warfighter, to selling to DoD, their customers are, USDA or the state of Florida Police Department, or whomever else, or an enterprise company, they have the option of going through the supply chain risk review, and we will write a report on how they do, and we will give that to them, and they can give that to their customer for their customer to make a risk-based decision on whether that supply chain risk works for them or not. We're not going to say, no, you can't possibly ever become green if you can't meet the DoD threshold for NDAA compliance. However, we're still offering that as an option, because there are those companies that want NDAA compliance to be able to sell to the DoD. So as I said, there's really 2 different pathways that companies can go. And I think the whole point of green is to meet this demand from industry and from the customers to have more flexibility in the original Blue program. We have the pathway to Blue. We also have this other new pathway that didn't exist before.
Perfect.
Yeah, but
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, just real quick. So just double clicking on this, I think the core question is, if you're trying to create a standard, so green UAS, and if it's a standards-based, assessment, right? So what I'm hearing is that there's going to be a report that's basically going to give an analysis, and then you're basically putting it on the agency to basically say, is this acceptable or not? I mean, is that going to make green viable, so that from a legislative lobbying effort, we stop pointing states to the Blue list so we can focus on the green list? So, I guess what I'm hearing is, like, if you're leaving it up to the agency to say, hey, let me read this report, right, and make the assessment, is that enough to give legislative ammunition to basically go after and say, hey, state, whatever, here's the list you should be looking at, not the Blue list, which is the DoD warfighter?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly hope so. We're undertaking a very aggressive education effort right now with multiple, federal, state, commercial entities briefing them on this. And I think, you know, a key point to this is our trusted cyber working group, working with our assessment teams, Dark Wolf, which was part of the team with Blue UAS, with DIU, and Fortress Information Security. We have still set a very, very high bar for companies. So, you know, this is not like an automatic, like you apply, you go through this, you know, you pass go, you do well. The part of the reason that this is going slower than I think we anticipated some of the companies anticipated is this is really hard. Like, we've still set a very high bar, it's a very high threshold. It's just that there is an opportunity for that threshold not to be the same as the NDA components. It doesn't mean that you still don't have to do very well in your cyber penetration test. Doesn't mean you still have to have a very high degree of fidelity. Because at the end of the day, like we talked a little bit about training and you know, and having an understanding of the operator. We all understand, like at a core, it's like in our ethics, it's baked into aviation that safety is sort of our foundation, and that we never compromise safety. Well, that same should be for security. We don't ever compromise security. That's sort of a core ethic of our industry. So we are ensuring that anything that gets on our green UAS list is meeting a very, very high bar of security, just as we expect that operator to have a very, very high bar of safety.